Awesome. So welcome in, everyone. My name is John, and today we are joined by Tyler, the co-founder of Clockwork Labs. If you haven't already, definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. We actually have a new Minecraft series coming out soon where we are porting an open source Minecraft server onto SpacetimeDB, which is very cool. So there'll be an entire series, so definitely stick around for that. Also, definitely give us a follow on Twitch. We are live at twitch.tv/SpacetimeDB, and this YouTube video was actually a live Twitch stream. So excellent, yes. And if anybody has questions in the chat, please post the questions and we will answer those questions as the stream progresses. BitCraft has launched into closed alpha. What does that mean for BitCraft, and what is closed alpha?
So the closed alpha of Bigcraft, essentially, I have actually a blog post about this topic, but the main idea of the closed alpha is that we now have a version of the game which is representative of the type of game that we want it to be. So it's not done, still under major development. A lot of things are not going to be there, but whereas the pre-alphas were about testing hypotheses we had about game design, the alpha is the first sort of skeleton of what the actual game will end up being. So it's very exciting to get it out, and that's why it's also not under NDA anymore like the pre-alpha was, and you can check it out here on Twitch. Actually, we got some people streaming it. Maybe pop into them later on.
Right, there's actually a Bigcraft category where you can go and view Bigcraft streams, which is very, very cool. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and for people watching, how can people get access to the closed alpha?
So to get access to closed alpha, you can sign up on our website, which is http s://bigcraftonline.com. John, if you could slap that in the chat. Sure. What is the max concurrent players on Bigcraft? The goal for Bigcraft is to have all the players, 100% of them, in the same world, in a single shared world. And so the ultimate answer to that question is an infinite number, right? However many we need to get into that world. And so I would distinguish that between what it is now and what it could theoretically be. So I think right now, we actually don't know what the maximum is because we haven't had a huge surge of people since we fixed some critical performance problems. So at the beginning of the alpha, I think it was like we could do like 400, and on some days we could only do like 200 because we had some silly things that were in the code. We've now pulled that out. It appears to be that we have no problems running at about 500 CCU, which is, for those who don't know that terminology, that means concurrently connected users. The next thing you can do is start getting into multi-version concurrency control, which is MVCC, which basically allows you to run things in parallel that you couldn't before because you're keeping multiple versions of the data and you're editing them and you're optimistically merging them in. So rather than a locking strategy, you're doing an optimistic strategy where you're saying, hey, I'm going to do these two different things. If they don't have any conflicts, then it's just going to commit. So as an example, if two players move, but they're not near each other, there's no reason those two transactions can't run in parallel. But in order to do that, you have to create some complex data structures. So with MVCC, and there's very many iterations of that, you could do anything from like basic MVCC to very fancy MVCC. But I would say the range of CCU that we would get from MVCC is something like, we would take it from maybe like 2,000, where we would be at then, to something like 4,000 to 5,000, maybe even more than that on a big machine. So you could consider getting up to 10,000 people. The thing to consider about that is that the subscription evaluation scales quadratically, whereas the actual reducers scale linearly. So what I mean by that is when a player moves, there are N other players that need to hear about it, that are subscribed to it. Actually, there's not N other players that need to hear about it. There's however many players that need to hear about it. But in order to find out if they should hear about it or not, we need to evaluate queries. And there's a lot of optimizations you can do to that. You can make that go really fast. But what I don't know is up when you get to like the 5,000 to 10,000 range, and you take 10,000 squared, that kind of thing. How fast can we go there? So I would say with MVCC, you can get up to between like 5,000 to 10,000, something thereabout. And then I would say there's an additional thing you can do. Once you've done that, now you can say, okay, we're going to turn our not distributed system. So that's a single database running thousands of users all in it at once. And you can do what's called like single reader, multiple writer situation. So this is kind of like MVCC, but what you're doing is you're now distributing you have your write node, which is doing only write transactions. And you have a bunch of other nodes that have replicated the database state to their own nodes in like 1 or 2 milliseconds if it's in the same data center, maybe even less. And then you will be sending players to subscribe to those machines. So this is like hey, we're going to fight the quadratic scaling of query evaluation by just spinning up more machines and doing that horizontally. So hopefully that answers the question. It's a very, very in-depth question. But the point is that it's a gradient, and we're going to be increasing and moving up that gradient as we implement more and more features inside of SpacetimeDB.
Maybe a related question. So Matt Papa, I'm excited to see how this performs under high load. Actually, how do you guys plan to stress test the server?
Everything you see in that game, the whole backend of Bigcraft, 100%. I mean, all the player movement. I mean, all the positions of all the trees. I mean, all the chat messages. I mean, all of it. 100% running inside of SpacetimeDB as a module. And we have had, I think, a maximum of like about 500 CCU at any one time, concurrently connected users in that game. So that was a stress test, and we learned a lot from it. And we've actually already improved the performance like 3 or 4 fold because we were doing something silly. So take a look at that. Watch people stream it. I suppose I would also say, in order to stress test it, we run bot tests against SpacetimeDB. Those have gotten to be quite elaborate because, well, it's actually hard to take SpacetimeDB down at this point, but we're also just going to throw users at it. But there's one that's from John Rapp, which is there a certain genre of games you're targeting for SpacetimeDB to be used? Are there any limitations that prevent SpacetimeDB from using it with certain genres that require different server functionality? So right now, I would say the best kind of game to use SpacetimeDB in is a persistent MMORPG. And I say that for 2 reasons. We don't really have any physics libraries for you available. You can use other ones and you can do a little translation between them. But it's not like awesome at that yet. I think John could speak more to that. He's been porting Minecraft over to SpacetimeDB. But MMOs fit that very well. And the other thing is persistence is a really hard problem, and MMOs use that most of all. Can it do other types of games? Sure. Could you make a fighting game in SpacetimeDB? I think so. I think there are different features we want to add to it that would make it better, like reliable UDP. Right now we use TCP. If you want to keep latency down a lot, we're not quite there yet, but there's nothing that says we cannot get there, and I fully intend to. So I'd like it to be applied to all genres of games, and I think it's good for all genres of games. You can even in SpacetimeDB disable persistence entirely if you don't want that. So you can just spin up a match as a database, run it all in memory, and then when it's over, it throws away all of the data, just fully in memory. No problem. So like a match-based game, fighting game, something like that could totally work. It's not the best experience right now. It will be better as time goes on.
Right. To piggyback off that as well, you could make, obviously, a fighting game or whatever right now, or like a game like CSGO. Like Tyler said, the UX is just not going to be the best, but I think we very much intend in the future to add features in which will make that UX much, much better. So, yeah.
One cool thing that we can do is deterministic simulation. So because it's all happening in a WASM module, you can run WASM deterministically, and then we can run your simulation, your server code on your client and do client-side prediction. So we will put the inputs into your client, change the data as it would normally change in the database, and then you can read from that directly, and then we can do reconciliation in the background. We don't have that yet, but like that'll make it really cool for sort of very twitchy games.
Why did you find it necessary to create a whole new system in SpacetimeDB just for Bigcraft?
Yeah, we tried not to. We didn't want to. We desperately didn't want to, because we wanted to make our game, and we just didn't want to also make anything else besides our game. What happened was we went and evaluated all the existing solutions. This was sometime around like 2018. So there was The biggest one I would say is probably Spatial OS, but there was also like there's one called Coherence. There's also, do we write our own game server and just connect to the database and all that? We didn't see anything, and we realized that we had to do something bespoke for Bigcraft, because unlike most MMOs out there, we had a lot more persistence than other people. So in Bigcraft, you can edit the terrain, you can cut down trees, you can change the world physically, and many MMORPGs don't. They're static. So something like Spatial OS, for example, didn't handle persistence. It was like, it literally just said, we only do in-memory simulation, and we do that across different servers. And if you want to write something to disk, we just don't do it. So it's like, okay, well, that's like a hard problem. So this doesn't really solve our hard problem. Let's do that ourselves. And we wrote a system that was not a database initially. It was just a system for Bigcraft, which did, I guess, transactions, and then and persisted them to disk as well. And we did this so that we didn't have to think so much about that. Normally in a database, in a game server, you've got the game simulation running on a server, and then a bunch of other microservices, which you maybe run two-phase commit between to make sure that you can actually write the data. But now the game developer has to think about like, oh, at what point do I want to persist this data and all this other stuff about the distributed system in which they're operating, rather than just developing the game. So in our case, we said, we're not going to do any of that. We have way too few people. We cannot spend the time and effort like making all these microservices and having them communicate between each other. Let's develop it this way. And we did that. And then one day we looked at it and said, this looks like a database. Maybe we should call it a database. So that's very much how that happened.
Mr. GUI asks, will I be able to host my own SpacetimeDB on my own private server and build an app/game?
Absolutely. So you can do that right now. If you go to github.com/SpacetimeDB, it is not open source, but it's source available. So let me explain what that means. Jeff Bezos and Amazon. So is basically the motivation there. So you can download SpacetimeDB. The source code's available. You can use it in production however you want, as long as you use one node and you don't resell it as a service. This is essentially an anti-AWS clause that says, hey, AWS can't take SpacetimeDB, run it, package it as Amazon SpacetimeDB, and then sell it to other people. This is basically a TLDR. It converts to an open source license in 4 years. So no matter what, you'll be able to do whatever you want with it in 4 years. But for now, you can use it for whatever you want, as long as you're not Amazon, kind of.
Do you know which license
on Twitch?
Do you know which license it converts to?
It converts to the. It's a little complex. I think we might even change that, but it currently converts to the AGPL v3 with a linking exception, and I can explain the reasoning for that. But I think we might switch to something more permissive, because it doesn't really matter, to be honest. What we wanted to do there is, like, if AWS was going to take it and make changes to it, we want those changes back. And so the AGPL would make them do that, kind of, but it's actually complex, so it's not clear that it's even worth it.
If your data gets corrupted and you must roll back at least 1 hour, do you have a process for it, or should it be a previously planified backup?
Right. So first of all, if the data rolls back for an hour, we lose an hour of data. That's a pretty bad problem. I don't expect to do that. When I'm talking about, hey, we're making optimistic durability guarantees, what I mean is like seconds, maybe at most, like hopefully just milliseconds. Like 10 milliseconds. An hour would be, somebody should be getting alerts. Nevertheless, it could in principle happen. What we do in that case is, of course, we want to have replicas. So you want to be replicating the data to other machines, so that even if a hard drive fails on one, you still have the data on another machine. So that's one thing. The other thing, obviously, is alerting. You don't want backups to not be happening for that much time. And the other one is snapshotting. So you want to be able to snapshot the state of the database so that even if you lose the history of the database, you don't lose the actual data in the database in that way. So it's a multifaceted process. But to be clear, SpacetimeDB is not meant to lose any data at any time. That's a big problem for databases. We allow users to listen in at an earlier stage in the durability pipeline if they so choose. but we're talking seconds or milliseconds, probably milliseconds, if that makes any sense. In most cases, like 99.9% of cases, you're talking like 10 milliseconds.
I don't know if you want to talk at all about how we had to replay the original log from like the first couple of days, and we actually restructured it into the new commit log, and maybe why we had to do that.
Sure. So the game was down for a while. One of the reasons it was down is we were using a third-party piece of open source software called Sled, which actually had a deadlock in it. And that required us to remove Sled, which we actually already know about this deadlock, and we actually already removed it, but it was deemed too risky to use the new commit log. So we had to kind of do an Indiana Jones while the game was up to replace the old commit log with the new commit log, which removes Sled entirely as a dependency. Which we did. And so now we're running on the new commit log without Sled.
So John Rapp asks, have there been any SpacetimeDB limitations discovered during the Bigcraft alpha that the team is still working on?
Yeah, it deadlocked. It deadlocked because of Sled. So that was one. There's a lot of other ones, but in general, so I would say this. The current sprint was supposed to be more focused on ABI stability. It ended up being, hey, we ran into all these problems with Bigcraft, which are like very easy to solve. We just didn't do them because we didn't think they were as important, and they became important. And so we switched that to be, let's just do all those things. So I think for the next month or so, we're just going to be doing things that are like, hey, these are obvious things that like once you run a game on top, you realize, we should probably have that. And we'll do all those things first. So absolutely there are. If you're wondering about like examples, I would say, yeah, the new commit log would have been nice. Some of the analytics stuff that we didn't get in would have been nice. The ability to publish a module without restarting the game would have been really nice. So there have been times where we just had to restart the game because we had to update some code in the module. We totally don't have to do that. Like you should be able to be connected to the game, us switch out the server logic, and you don't even know. Like that is a thing that we can and will achieve, I would say, in the next month, because it turns out that that's a feature that we undervalued.
Did coming to that realization change plans or add a bit of, oh darn moment, as making an MMO is hard, which I think it's a common phrase in the game dev world to not make an MMO as your first game because they are hard. And also making a DBMS is hard, and suddenly you find now you have both issues. Or was it a case that you realized you'd need something of this complexity from the very start to make an MMO, so that the only difference was what you named it?
Yeah, so I think I understand the question. I'll answer it in two different ways. So one is, it's certainly, if at the beginning of this I did not have a full grasp on how complex it would be, but also it was of different scope. Originally I think we wanted to do like just a mobile only title kind of a thing, and then it was like, that's boring, let's make a game. As we got more resources, we sort of expanded the scope. I think mobile client for Bigcraft is like a definite goal. It's part of the reason why Click to Move also makes sense, because it's like, I want to be able to take my game wherever I go. There's no reason that mobile games have to be bad. We got these cool computers we're using, let's just put some good games on it. So that's one thing. It was of smaller scope originally, but no, I did not anticipate how difficult it would become. With respect to, did we like decide like, we're making an MMO and now we're making a DBMS and now we have both issues? No, we actually, the moment we decided to make Bitcraft in the way that it is, we had the DBMS issue. We just didn't really call it that. So it was very much more of a case of, let's solve the specific problem of making Bigcraft work with some kind of backend program that we write, and then realizing that, actually it's a database, and then just at some point giving it a name and giving it a product page and actually making a product, which is like was maybe 20% additional work, if that. So it was much more, the moment we signed up to make Bigcraft, we signed up to make a database, which is kind of how it is.
Excellent. So Duke Odd DK. I saw a podcast where you explained that SpacetimeDB is using event sourcing. Does that mean you can have 100% auditability of a table? And Tyler, if you could quickly remind me of the name of the channel just so I can find the video.
Developer Voices. It's a really cool podcast, I think, that he's running. Excited to see where it goes. So yeah, it does mean that. So right now, what it means is, right now we are recording. So there's 500 CCU. Every single thing that happens in that game, in the history of it. So we could do like a flyover. What do you call it when you like show something really fast, like a time lapse? You could do like a time lapse of people building their cities over time, which would be really cool. And we could do that. We're actually storing everything. It's event sourced. We can do all of that. Yes, 100%. That is what that means. For everything that is in the game, including player movement. Just to be clear, you'd see the players running around and stuff.
So there's a good question. Doesn't that take an insane amount of disk space? And maybe you can talk about, Tyler, how much disk space we're at and how fast it's growing as well.
Yeah, so that's the question. It's always the next question I get. Oh, isn't that a lot of disk space? So I'm going to actually make the argument that it's less disk space than you would normally need. It's actually quite a bit less. When I worked at a company called Machine Zone, I was in their data science and engineering department, and they wanted to do data science. Any sufficiently advanced game company wants to do data science on their players so they can find out, hey, where are the players getting stuck? What causes them to churn out of the game? What causes them to spend? What's all this stuff? There's a whole bunch of data that you want to do. And in order to do that, guess what? You need historical data. So what a lot of companies end up doing, including the one I worked for, is they start snapshotting the data like every 12 hours. And that doesn't sound too bad, except when you realize, well, it's bad for two reasons. One is, that's not great data. You only have 12-hour like snapshots of the data. You don't know what anything happened in between there at all. You just know how it was every 12 hours. So that's also not great. It's awful, I would actually say, particularly for machine learning models and things of that nature. But more to the point, it's a huge amount of data because 99.9% of the data in your databases is not changing within a 12-hour period. If you've had, let's say, just take the case of Bigcraft, like all of the terrain, how much of the terrain actually changes within a 12-hour period? Not a lot, right? But if you're snapshotting, now you're copying that every single time over and over again because you don't have the intelligence to know what has actually changed. So what Bigcraft and SpacetimeDB do instead is they store just the deltas, so just the changes that have happened since the last in this current transaction, and it ends up being a very small amount of data. Now let's do some math, right? Because let's get that on the napkin and see how much data it is. So in the case of Bigcraft, right, the most common thing that changes in a transaction is the transform of the player. Like, where are they located? So how big is the transform? Well, it's, let's say, three F32s, so 3 floats for the position, 4 floats for the rotation. I think that's it. Is that right? I think
that
so.
Is.
So how many?
Correct, yeah.
No, sorry. Yes, 4 times 7 bytes, which is 28 bytes. So 28 bytes. Let's call it 32 bytes because we're gonna have to have some headers and stuff in there. Every so many transforms. So let's call it 32 bytes. Well, let's say you had a 1,000,000 CCU game, right? How much data is a 1,000,000 CCU game going to generate if people are moving 10 times a second? No, let's say actually, let's not make it 1,000,000. Let's say 100,000 CCU, which is a very big game. So let's say 100,000 CCU, and let's say they're everyone, the whole game, everybody's logged in at all times, and they're moving 10 times per second. Well, let's say it's 32 then bytes times 100,000 players times 10 times per second. So it's 32 million bytes, 32 megabytes per second times 60 seconds in a minute times 60 minutes in an hour times 24 hours in a day times 365 days in a year. You end up with, let's see, that's kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, 1 petabyte of data per year you're adding to your database. So how much does that cost? Well, it costs not that much money, it turns out. It costs, I think it's like about $0.01 per gigabyte. So let's see how much that is. And this is like if you're going to buy hard drive. So you could even do per month. But no matter how you slice it, it's less than 1 engineer per month to store all the data. So you just do the math. You just do the napkin math. You actually realize, well, wait a second. I can either hire an engineer to do my crappy 12-hour snapshotting thing down the road when I need that data, or I can just store the data. And of course, although we don't advise it, you are able to delete the data if you don't want, because we're going to snapshot. So you can truncate the log. I recommend against it. I would say any data that humans can generate by moving around in the world is cheap enough for you to store. Like that's the reality that you're in 2024 in terms of hard drive costs. And I guess John also mentioned like how much data is Bigcraft using right now. So I think we have like 60 gigabytes of data, something like that. That is uncompressed. So when you compress it, you get about a 6-fold improvement in the data storage. So you're talking like 10 gigabytes.
So we have another question from John Rapp. Is SpacetimeDB's future goals organized to be in support of the launch of Bigcraft, or is there also a focus on acquiring other users, customers, games to use SpacetimeDB?
There is. We definitely want SpacetimeDB to be its own product on its own. Right now, our number one customer is Bigcraft, so we're focusing essentially all of our efforts to make sure that is successful. But I think SpacetimeDB is a very useful product. The goal of it, the reason we even released it in the first place is I believe an indie dev with like a team of 6 could make an MMORPG if only they had the tools. And in this case, it simplifies it down enough that I think you could reasonably do that. You could even imagine a single developer making an MMORPG in Bigcraft, because we handle the scaling up to 10,000 users, right? So you could probably call that an MMORPG. I mean, you certainly could call that an MMORPG. Ours is a weird MMORPG. It's actually one of the harder ones to build on SpacetimeDB because you have to do all this stitching together of different regions. But that's not the case in most MMORPGs. You just have different worlds, which just makes it very simple.
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting. Like, imagine if you would have had the current state of SpacetimeDB back when you originally started Bigcraft. Like, how much faster we would have been able to.
We could have skipped over, a lot of stuff.
Yeah. If the regions of the game are spread across different servers and the server for a specific region is at its limits, will there be queues to wait to cross into that region? How will you handle those goblins?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think probably. I think it'll just be you'll go when you cross into a region, it'll put up a thing saying like the region is full. Would you like to join a queue? And then you'll have a queue. But all the more reason to make an individual region as big as possible, so that rarely happens. And then there's a lot of game design things you can do by like spawning people in certain areas to keep density of players correct. So as you have new players join, they're not clogging up popular regions and stuff like that.
How is chat doing? Also, so I guess maybe I'll do my CTA now, kind of for the midpoint here. The Bigcraft channel as well on Twitch is actually a real thing now. So it's twitch.tv/BitCraftOnline. We've done one stream on there already. So we're planning on doing more streams. We had a lot of fun with it. I think there was like a crazy amount of people in there. It was like basically like 1,000 people in there for most of the stream. So if you haven't already, definitely follow us on twitch.tv/BitCraftOnline as well. Yeah, come check us out if we're streaming Bigcraft stuff. So over there we're more focused on the game and less focused on SpacetimeDB, but we can still answer SpacetimeDB questions over there as well. Patch note talks would be really fun and exciting. So we have done those in the past for previous releases, and we actually have a release that's coming up very soon. I think we'll probably wait for the actual patch notes stream to go over specifics, but it contains a lot of fixes and performance, really a lot of performance improvements that we've added in since doing the Bigcraft alpha. So that'll be coming out soon. And then after that release, we are planning on doing another major release probably in the next like month or two. Which I don't know, Tyler, if you want to talk about the focus of that release at all, or like what things will be focused on for SpacetimeDB kind of moving forward after kind of the closed alpha time. So
after that, we're focused on moving towards mainnet. So right now there's a test net, which is what we call it, for SpacetimeDB, which is like our cloud service sort of that we offer. And the test net is free, but also trade-offs. We don't guarantee your data persistence. In fact, we periodically will wipe it. The mainnet you pay for, but we have an SLA on that. So we're trying to launch that prerequisite to doing that is that we get SpacetimeDB itself in 1.0 state. So that means we're going to stabilize our APIs so that we can do that. So that's going to be our main focus after the Bigcraft thing is done, is like getting to that point, because I think that's an important aspect of what we're trying to do. Fun chatting with you guys today. Just throwing that out.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, thank you everybody for watching. We really appreciate it. We're starting a raid here to go check out what Just a Game over screen is playing. Obviously, he's playing Bigcraft. So yeah, we'll see you guys.
I love that. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine. Okay, awesome. So yeah, definitely check us out on YouTube. This if you've missed some of this video, it will be available on YouTube. So awesome.
Did I ruin your YouTube outro, by the way?
No, that was fine. Okay. It's fine. Okay, awesome. So thank you everybody for watching. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. So thank you everybody. Bye.
Bye.